right, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Elections Weekly. Sorry we had to postpone it from yesterday. We had a setback with personal issues, so we've moved it back to today. Thankfully, it's given us a little bit more time to go over some of the political news of the week, redistricting news, new polling out of Ohio, and the newest initiative in Congress, which seems to be getting a lot of attention as of late. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off with the redistricting news. The Florida Supreme Court somewhat surprisingly said that they don't feel comfortable accepting Ron DeSantis' request to preemptively rule on the validity of the current Florida 5 configuration. Ron DeSantis has been pushing a more gerrymandered version of the map of the Florida Legislature, which would eliminate the questionably VRA Florida 5 seat in northern Florida, which stretches from Tallahassee to Jacksonville. The seat, despite what some may say on Twitter, is questionable as both a VRA seat and a Florida Fair Districts Amendment seat. It's quite possible that the configuration that exists right now, which is not majority black, is not protected by the VRA because it's not majority black. It's also quite possible the Florida Fair Districts Amendment could require a seat entirely in Duval County in Jacksonville, which would still be about 60% Democratic in the Democratic primary. So it's also entirely possible that the Florida Supreme Court could declare that no Democratic seat is needed in North Florida and basically just gut the Fair Districts Amendment, given how conservative the court is. So given that news, the Florida legislature seems pretty set initially on the current configuration. Ron DeSantis has since come out and said that he will veto any map which includes the Jacksonville and Tallahassee configuration, which is at this point the key splitting point of the map. The rest of the map generally seems to be somewhat similar between the House and the Senate. The difference is, of course, the the Tampa Bay area. I believe the Senate map has 3 Democratic seats in the Tampa area, while the House map only has 2. There's also debate over how to split up the Orlando area. So basically, most of it's around Central Florida. South Florida seems to be fairly set. But given this news, we're not sure how Florida is going to go. This is the biggest Republican state that's outstanding, Republican-controlled state in redistricting. Ohio and North Carolina, obviously, are also important, and they're having their own legal battles over redistricting right now. But we'll go into those more later when there's more developing out of them. We've not really seen a ton of developments from them beyond just basic legal and court stuff. So I'll go ahead and throw it to Joe and Dylan here. What do you think of the court's decision in this case to not preemptively, consider the legality of the seat? Do you think the map will be redrawn to exclude the current configuration? And do you think that the DeSantis-style gerrymander stands a chance of passing the legislature?
As far as whether it can pass the legislature, I think DeSantis threatening to veto any other map basically ensures it. I can't imagine a veto override in this case. I'm not as surprised that the court decided to stay out of it. It seems like the court wants to be out of this whole mess. They don't want to have to deal with it. They're tired. I get it. This has been an exhausting cycle.
Yeah. People don't generally want to admit this when it comes to Supreme Court, especially partisan Supreme Courts, but except in rare cases, courts generally do not want to get involved with redistricting cases and litigation. They don't want to decide what districts are going in. They don't want to be the ones who are deciding to do that. They don't want that. Now, if they are forced to do it, they will do it. Pennsylvania has been a good case. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, if you look at kind of the actions that were going on with the map drawing, very clearly did not want to oppose themselves on the process, but have kind of been forced to, just by way of how the legislatures and the governor have just refused to come to the table on any sort of means to draw a map. But it comes down, I think, to I think right now there's pretty clearly going to be a deal. The House map, as Eric mentioned, is significantly more, I shouldn't say significantly, but it's definitely more gerrymandered than the state Senate maps proposed by Florida. This has been a common occurrence throughout southern states that state House maps have been more gerrymandered for the Republican Party than ones proposed by the state Senate. And then in the end, generally, the map that is finalized is generally closer to the state house version than the state senate version. This happened in Georgia. This happened in South Carolina. So it's not at all impossible that the state house map, which is an 18-10 Trump map with a seat in Tampa, that it was only about Biden plus 3.5, that could definitely be run by Republicans in the type of year we're looking at. So, that's one of those. It's one of those things where we could see Florida's fifth. We could see Ron DeSantis hold himself to that promise. But I think if we see the state House Republican map get through, I think he would be tempted to just kind of let that go. I would say it's a pretty solid map for Republicans. Draws out the Stephanie Murphy seat, the new seat that they have to add, the 28th seat, which would be renumbered. I believe is this the state House map, Eric, that I'm looking at?
Yeah, this is the Senate. Yeah, this is the state House map.
Yeah, the state House map, that 15th is the technical new map. Is technically the new seat that is about Trump plus 1, somewhere around that margin.
Plus 0.1.
Plus 0.1. Okay, so it's basically a marginal seat. There that some have argued, you take in some of 12, and that could make, because that 12 is a very Republican seat. But no matter what you kind of have to say here, this is a pretty Republican map. The 28th and 27th, and now renumber 26th, the 28th, and the 27th are still relatively quite Republican districts. They are now Republican districts, both in the Trump year. The new 6th, which is the now renumbered 7th, is a Republican district there. That's about Trump plus 4.5, I believe. So, if this is the map that's passed, I think it'll be very hard for Governor DeSantis to veto it personally, even though it has the Florida 05 on here, numbered Florida 03 configuration. I think if we get this map as the final map, it's going to be very hard for Governor DeSantis to veto it. This is a good map for Republicans. Like the baseline, this is a good map for Republicans. It would be very hard for a Republican governor to veto this map in Florida.
Yep. And one unusual factor here to keep in mind is one other thing that people are considering is the legislature is debating over whether or not Orange County needs to have a black interest district. Right now, the current 10th district drawn here actually draws in the Republican areas of Western Orange County, which are around, I believe it's around like Disneyland and a bunch of other portions which are not as Democratic friendly as the central and eastern parts of the county. This puts that into 10, which is similar to in much other Republican parts of Central Florida. There is debate over how that should be drawn, so it's something we'll be looking at in the coming weeks as we see this process go forward. It really is something we're going to be watching because, as we've said numerous times, this is the biggest Republican state left. Barring something happening in New York, for example, where New York's maps could be overturned from their court, or in Maryland, which actually just issued an injunction, or which moved their primary filing date back a month as they consider a challenge to the new Democratic gerrymander in that state. This is basically the last big shot Republicans have to claw back at some of their redistricting losses. So it's going to be a big question of what happens. I see you got your cat there, Dylan.
Yes, she decided to attack the webcam.
Like cats. Always good to see. But yeah, so that's Florida. That's the big state we're looking at right now. North Carolina and Ohio, as I said, are continuing as per usual. I'll give a little brief on North Carolina here. Right now, North Carolina is kind of in stasis. Technically speaking, maps are supposed to be filed in about a week. The problem is the legislature has no clue what they're supposed to be doing, and neither do the plaintiffs, because the court did not issue a set standard as to what the map should look like. So right now, the Democratic plaintiffs who are trying to propose a different map don't know what to draw. The legislature also doesn't know what to draw. They don't know what standard would be acceptable, what the legislature considers to be proportional. For example, under one of the court suggested methods, Republicans would still have a substantial majority in the state Senate and in the state House. It wouldn't actually change too much at all from the current map situation, from how these districts are electing people currently. So, and on top of that, the most mathematically probable map in North Carolina would be a 9-5. Republican map. 8-6 is the second most likely. 7-7 is not mathematically among the most likely North Carolina. So I'm pretty sure even a 10-4 is more likely in a blind computer drawn map than a 7-7. So everyone is basically kind of on hold trying to figure out what the court wants. The court is apparently considering pushing back primary dates, which would be what the legislature wants, gives them more time to draw the maps. And the Democratic plaintiffs would also like to know what's going on. In Ohio, the Ohio Supreme Court and the legislature and the Redistricting Commission are at a standstill. The court is, not only for the legislative districts, but the congressional, are wanting more proportional maps. The legislature is arguing you cannot do this without violating the compactness requirements and the county splitting requirements. And the Democrats in particular are proposing some creative maps that would produce a more proportional split, but also stand no chance of passing in a Republican state. So that's kind of the standoff there is between the Supreme Court, the legislature, and the Republican-dominated Redistricting Commission. We'll give you more updates as it goes on, but it's really just a standoff right now as again, people try to figure out what the court would consider acceptable and then do something along those lines. So that would be, I think, aside from Pennsylvania. Actually, you want to go over Pennsylvania's news? Because I think Pennsylvania had some redistricting news this week as well.
Well, yeah, we've pushed the filing date back. That's official as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court starts to consider multiple iterations of the map after rejecting the Commonwealth Court Special Master's chosen map. So we are in a process here in Pennsylvania. We are going through the process again. From what I've heard, no one really knows what the thinking is right now. People have generally called the Pennsylvania the Pennsylvania Supreme Court super hackish. It's not like a California or an Oregon or a New York where that's a concern. If Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court wanted to be hackish, they would have done something significantly worse than the current map in the forced redraw of 2018 that they had to take over.
Triangle seat.
Yeah, triangle seat still a gerrymander. From what I've heard, the proposed map from the Mark Elias group is considered in circles the favorite right now. That is the rumor I've heard. I don't think either of us will be able to find that as quickly to put it up for you guys.
I'll see if I can find it. And although it's worth noting, the Mark Elias Pennsylvania map is actually not bad, despite Mark Elias having a reputation, to put it lightly, on both the right and the left of some of his actions. The map that his group has proposed is actually not terrible. It's not the map I would choose personally, but it's also not by far the worst map that's out there. But I'm seeing if I can find it real quick because I don't think I'm going to be able to find it that quickly, but maybe.
Yeah, but right now that's the map that people have heard is favored. It's very likely that either of the House Democratic proposals are accepted. Both are considered extreme gerrymanders. One, I think drags in the entire city of Pittsburgh into the county of Butler. Just does a nice little drag, literally right up there. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But, to counteract that this is a big win for Democrats, Pennsylvania has been fighting the last two cycles with a fair map. This makes no real conceivable, especially if they pick the Elias map, this makes no conceivable difference in that Republicans are still going to be clearly targeting the seat that will be formerly held by Connor Lamb since he's retiring to run for Senate, Susan Wild, and Matt Cartwright. That would make no conceivable difference from what the target list is now to what the target list would be under the new map.
Mm-hmm. Which map is officially called the Elias, or is the Elias?
If you look at Stephen Caruso, I know had a big thread about it. It's on there. It still looks like a lease change map, basically.
Mm-hmm. I think I found it, but I don't want to show without giving a look. But basically, the map that that's not going to be the right one. But regardless, the map that will be chosen will probably not be the one that has Pittsburgh with Butler County. That's or the Republican one, which the very conservative Trump judge selected. To put it one way, the special master, who's not really that special. That's Pennsylvania. Again, another big state outstanding, but we're not expecting too much of a change in the status quo. We're still expecting a competitive seat in the Pittsburgh area. We're still expecting Brian Fitzpatrick to be the favorite by a considerable margin in the 1st district. We're still expecting a competitive Lehigh Valley seat. We're still expecting Matt Cartwright's probably going to lose, regardless of the configuration that's being drawn in his district or around the Scranton area. And we're still expecting a somewhat competitive seat based around in central Pennsylvania. None of the maps that have really been will be considered by the court will change any of that. So while there's a lot of debate over this, the actual selection options are pretty stable in terms of what is likely going to happen. But yeah, that is our redistricting segment of the week. Obviously, a lot of news, a lot of litigation. I don't have the statistics here, but I swear this is the most litigious redistricting cycle to date. It seems like if there's a map, there is a lawsuit immediately filed afterwards by someone somewhere over the legality of the map. Again, we'll keep you posted as things continue to progress, as the cycle closes out and we get these last few states to get their selected maps. So on to our next topic is I'll let Dylan lead off on this one, which is the stock trading bill. We've mentioned this several episodes ago. The push towards a ban on congressional stock trading. Initially, it appeared like this path had been shut off by congressional Democratic leadership, but in recent weeks, it's taken a much more different turn, and there's now bipartisan support and a bipartisan proposal. I believe from Chip Roy and Abigail Spanberger, two very, very different representatives. One a very libertarianish representative from the German Hill Country in Texas, and then the other Abigail Spanberger coming from Richmond suburbs, moving into a new district now. But coming from the Richmond suburbs.
And I believe in the Senate, Steve Daines and Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah. Now, Daines, actually, that's not unusual. Montana has a pretty well-known distaste of... Yeah, Montana has a well-known disdain for corporate influence in politics. They really, really, really dislike it. That's not entirely surprising to me.
No.
But yeah, I'll go ahead and throw it to Dylan here to kind of explain what's going on there.
Yeah, so I had kind of written this off. If you watched our last episode, we kind of said this was dead on arrival. Nancy Pelosi had come out against the bill, so it seemed pretty definitive. But then there were a couple Senate proposals. The one I mentioned by Steve Daines and Elizabeth Warren, one that was proposed by Senator John Ossoff, who we mentioned last time as well. And then Majority Leader Schumer actually came out in support of the bill, which definitely raised my eyebrows. You don't typically have the Senate Majority Leader and the House Speaker from the same party going and publicly opposing each other's statements. But then Nancy Pelosi walked it back a little bit and said, okay, maybe we can do something, which, just my speculation, Schumer and Pelosi definitely didn't talk about this beforehand. And I imagine there was a very angry phone call from Pelosi's office to Schumer's before she had to kind of walk it back. Because it's a bad look for your Senate colleague to propose something and then for you to oppose it on seemingly only personal grounds. So color me shocked, but I'm actually thinking we're going to see this pass now. I think now it's only a matter of time, especially with a few Republicans on board. I don't know how many they'll get. I believe Mitch McConnell actually came out in support of the bill as well. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think he was non-committal, but it wasn't a no.
Yeah, I doubt, especially with as you said, it's with the position that Kevin McCarthy has taken. It would surprise me if McConnell would end up against this bill.
Yeah. So I fully expect this to pass at this point, which is not what I would have expected even 3 days ago.
And oddly enough, we have three proposals right now. So you have the House proposal, which is the Spanberger Chip Roy bill, which is truly bipartisan. It has a bunch of co-sponsors from both parties, which is typically what happens with these sort of bills. In the Senate, you have two bills. You have the bill from Ossoff and Kelly, I believe, which is the less restrictive bill. Then you have the Warren Daines bill, which is the more extent, which to the point some people have said is too radical to become law. It would actually ban
music to my ears.
Yeah, it would actually. These proposals would also restrict spouses from trading stocks, which could be a
Isn't that
stickler
the
for.
point?
Yeah, well, you're already asking members of Congress to sell off their financial assets. Doing it for spouses as well is the sticking point. For example, Ted Cruz is a senator who you could conceivably see supporting a bill that would restrict this. Chip Roy's already supporting it. They're very similar. Ted Cruz has a populist streak. He's not a huge fan of this sort of stuff, and it's actually pretty common for Republicans to complain about this sort of thing going on in politics now. But his wife is actually an executive, I believe, at Goldman Sachs. It'd be very unlikely for Ted Cruz to support a bill that would require his wife to sell off her financial assets. So you could see amendments, you could see changes, you could see that. But that's just how the legislative process works, or it's supposed to work. That's not how it's always worked, but it's how it's supposed to work. Is you have this collaborative process. So, I think I said in that episode that, we've seen similar populist stuff like this happen before, for lack of a better term. In the 2010s, it was the earmark ban. That was a issue Republicans really took charge on. And then President Obama, in a State of the Union address, said he wouldn't sign any bill with earmarks in it. And so the House, the Senate were pretty much stuck in a hole at that point and had to get rid of them. Obviously, they've come back. To my chagrin, along with the chagrin of some other people, as well as to the applause of a bunch of other people in Capitol Hill who have their own reasons, good reasons they would argue for supporting it. But you did see that at least happen. There have been actions like this done before. You had the campaign finance bill in the 2000s. You had a lot of investigations into corrupt congressmen in the 1990s. This sort of stuff has been known to pass before. It's good meat for voters to go back home and say, hey, I've passed this great bill which will prevent congressmen from being corrupt. That's a really, really good selling point if you're going home.
The only representative I've seen come out against it is Elaine Luria.
Yeah, that one was really surprising too, because Abigail Spanberger, as Eric already mentioned, is like the prime Democratic sponsor on this bill, and both have been drawn into a tough real. Luria especially. Luria lost the outer part of Norfolk for all of Chesapeake and Suffolk and part of the Isle of Wight now, which that is not a good. That's not necessarily a great trade.
Wasn't this like a Youngkin plus 10 or so seat in the governor race?
The redrawn second district was a Youngkin plus 11 seat, mainly driven by how much Virginia Beach swung back, in part because of how Suffolk and Chesapeake swung, but definitely from that Biden plus 5 to Youngkin plus 11 swing in Virginia Beach, which there was a map someone drew today of the Virginia Beach precincts, and it is very easy to tell the swing that occurred there in November. Virginia Beach is a place that could very much end up being a problem in 2022 for Democrats. If you lose Virginia Beach, you've lost that district. And if Elaine Luria cannot win Virginia Beach in 2022, she's lost that seat. You can't win that seat without winning Virginia Beach. That should be said. And it's very interesting that Luria has kind of taken this stand. That's something very, very interesting to see. It's something that I don't think a lot of people expected. Especially with Spanberger being one of the main sponsors. To the best of our knowledge, these two were decent friends from their 2018 runs that flipped what was the old 7th and the 2nd seat in 2018. So it was definitely a surprise to see Spanberger come so out against it. Luria to come so out against it.
Yeah. Even Tom Malinowski has spoken fairly favorably of this.
I was about to say, you won over Tom Malinowski. You don't come out against that bill. And her argument was incredibly just perplexing. Basically, why would you elect somebody and then not trust them? Why would you hire somebody and then do performance reviews?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the, I always think about Malinowski. It's like the Garfield meme where it's Garfield looking at the no Garfield sign. That's what signing this agreement is like for Malinowski. Wonder who that's for.
Malinowski's like, please, let me sign this bill immediately. I'll stop getting in trouble. I don't know how this works.
No, but this is the best piece of legislation we've bipartisan legislation that we've seen come out in like half a decade. So
yes, this is an unequivocally good bill, and I am
pass it, Congress.
Shocked.
Please.
I am shocked that it's getting through.
Yeah, we don't usually expect good bills to pass in Congress, but
no,
maybe there's an opportunity here to break that streak a little bit. I'm still hopeful that the earmark ban will return with the next Congress, but I'm hoping beyond hope for that. But we'll see. This would be a pretty good consolation prize for me, at least, though.
Yeah, and good job. Good job on John Ossoff for running a campaign against stock trading and then actually following through on it. That's also really rare.
When he has a 6-year term, It's not like he needed to do this now. He could have done this in year 5.
I know it's incredibly rare for a politician to genuinely care about what they run their campaign on.
Totally exonerated. No crime. David Perdue, totally exonerated.
Yeah, not the greatest campaign out of all time.
Truly, that's when we all knew there was a problem. That's when everything started to go downhill. Was that ad where you had to run the screen? David Perdue, totally exonerated. No corruption, totally exonerated. Definitely not insider trading. No sirree, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll go ahead and move on to our next topic, maybe our final topic of the night. We'll see. Some of the Senate primaries. So Senate primaries are fascinating right now. Joe could talk all day about Pennsylvania, and I may let him do that. But first off, we're going to start with Ohio, which is actually Ohio and Arizona. So Ohio has been a really, really interesting primary. This is a very, very, very divided field. You have a bunch of Republicans running, a bunch of high-name Republicans running. Josh Mandel's been the presumed favorite, the former treasurer of Ohio and current advocate for Judeo-Christian values, specifically the Christian part of Judeo-Christian values, apparently, has run a very
specifically the anti-Muslim part.
Yeah, very, very unusual campaign from Josh Mandel so far, running in Ohio like it is Alabama in 2003. But he's leading in the polls until recently. Recently, polls have been showing something unusual. No, it's not a J.D. Vance surge. J.D. Vance is considerably toward the back of the pack, polling consistently around 5% of the vote. It's actually been a different candidate that has been emerging, and it's not Jane Timken. It's not Jane Timken either. I'll go ahead and throw it to Joe to explain the new rising star of the Ohio Republican primary here.
Look at the Gibmomentum, everyone! It's the Gibmomentum, the Gibbons-mentum. We are all excited by it. We are all encouraged by it. I mean, come on.
Confused.
It's Mike Gibbons. Mike Gibbons, the man who has somehow turned himself around. He is truly the new face of the Ohio Republican Party. I mean, just look at this individual. Look at him.
Now,
so behind the scenes, get the face up here. Hold up. There we go. Does this work? Yes. He's Rand Paul endorsed.
Yep.
He looks like that man. Wait, that was Rand Paul.
This is the face of the Ohio Republican Party. Look at him.
No, that really is. It really is the face of the Ohio Republican Party.
Look at him right there.
An old white man. Yeah, that.
In a suit.
Yeah.
Specifically in a suit. Probably from Cleveland or Cincinnati. One of the two.
Cleveland.
He was born in Cleveland.
Born in Cleveland.
Yeah. Always one of the two.
Some behind the scenes. I had not heard Mike Gibbons' name until I joined the backstage call and heard Joe yelling Gibbons Mentum. Still don't know who Mike Gibbons is. But hey, he's not Josh Mandel.
He's led through 2 of the last 3 Republican polls, one from Coefficient, the other from Signal. WPAI put out a poll. I believe they're polling internally for Josh Mandel, who was
that is correct.
Who was supported by the Club for Growth, of course, known for their support of exceptional Republican candidates at all levels, generally speaking. Recently, obviously, originally Jane Timken was considered the the major Republican candidate to oppose Josh Mandel. It's never been Josh Vance, despite what some NFT crypto bros on Twitter will tell you. It's the same thing about Blake Masters in Arizona. But this emergence of Mike Gibbons is really interesting. It actually kind of reminds me of the 2018 primary in Indiana, where you had the Republican senator there retiring, and then you had two Republican candidates, incumbent office holders, just sparring at each other the entire campaign, just fighting at each other tooth and nail, which allowed a third candidate, the current Republican senator from Indiana, to emerge and win that race and defeat Democrat Joe Donnelly. That was a really, really enlightening race, and it was specifically against a Trump endorsement, I believe. And like Mike Gibbons, Mike Braun in Indiana is an unusual Republican in a lot of respects, but more of a businessman, an outsider candidate who was able to support himself with a bunch of funding and strategic endorsements. If you look at that primary in 2018, and I'll go ahead and pull up the graphic here for you so you can see it. In this race, he managed to get in with about 41% of the vote, where the other two candidates, I'm sorry, they changed the screen sharing thing on here. I've got to rework it here. But he managed to, obviously, you see here, get 41% of the vote. Todd Rotika got 29% of the vote, and then Luke Messer got another 28% of the vote. They each had their own geographic regions, whereas Barra was able to win throughout the state. So just from my perspective as someone who knows not a ton about Ohio politics, aside from its love for generic middle-aged to pre-elderly white men in suits from Cleveland or Cincinnati, one of the two. It's never Columbus. It's always Cleveland or Cincinnati, or Dayton maybe. Sometimes Dayton, usually Cincinnati. But it's definitely interesting to see, in particular, the Mandel campaign not necessarily taking off. They've been the presumptive frontrunner for most of the race here. But they've never really cracked the 20% threshold in polls. They've been pretty steadily 20, 30%, but have never had that big, gigantic lead. There's been a lot of undecided voters, and there still are. But do you think that Mike Gibbons could be the one to defeat Josh Mandel to provide that? Because Mandel's frankly not running a great campaign. I know there's memes. He's just generally just not running a great campaign.
I think the comparison to Indiana 2018 is absolutely viable. It's they have their differences, but especially when it comes down to the state Republican parties at the cultural level, there are certainly similarities between Indiana and Ohio's Republican base at a cultural level, especially now with Ohio's changes. Gibbons, again, I think the comparisons to Mike Braun are fair. Outsider businessman who has been involved but not necessarily active in Republican politics in the state, has the money to fund his primary campaign against a wide range of opponents, and someone who is, unlike Matt Dolan, starting to crack the field. Gibbons is not as crazy as Mandel. He's not as populist as Vance. He's more along the Timken wing where, he is a strong Republican, but he doesn't necessarily go overboard into certain, undesirable topics a la, Josh Mandel.
Who is quite literally running a campaign where one of his main talking points is that there's no such thing as a separation of church and state, which, again, why are you running
not a true thing. No, separation of church and state, very good thing. Very good thing to have.
And explicitly written.
Yes. But I think the comparisons to Indiana 2018 are fair, and you've given me an idea now, Eric. I might steal that for you from an article. Thank you very much. But, Gibbons, when you start seeing internals like that, this has been something that's been growing for a while. This has been a slow but continuous growth from Gibbons from about fourth to third to, he's starting to appear in second, and now, all of a sudden he's appearing in first place. This has been the type of thing that it works in wide-out primaries. Bernie Moreno is out. Surprise, not doesn't look like a lot of Moreno's votes have necessarily dissipated yet. And if they have, it doesn't look like they've all necessarily gone down the entire way. So, gone all the way to Mandel like some expected from Moreno's camp. So, this is I think the comparison is very viable to Indiana 2018 here. It's something to watch. We still have a long way to go, but it's certainly shorter than when we started doing these podcasts. I mean, my goodness me, it's already February 11th today. So, this is getting closer. We have Texas primaries coming up in literally 2 weeks from this Tuesday. We have Texas primaries are going to go down.
Now,
that's a crazy thing, I think, to a lot of people, but we're going to have Texas primaries going down in 2 weeks from Tuesday, and we'll be there. We will be live on that Tuesday night for those Texas primaries. Believe me on that. So, there's a lot going on, but Mike Gibbons, I think, needs to start being taken seriously by the analyst community as someone saying, hey, this guy is someone who could very easily find himself as the GOP nominee in Ohio. And then that would likely mean someone who is, quite likely the next Republican senator from Ohio as well.
So, question, when is the Ohio Senate primary? Because I'd like to play devil's advocate, but if it's in a month, then this devil's advocate doesn't mean anything.
Looks like it's May 3rd.
So, if I'm looking, and there are only a couple polls that I can find from the Indiana 2018 race, Mike Braun peaked about a month before the primary. That was the first time there was any poll with him on top, and then there was only one other poll after that showing him on top about 2 days before the primary. Mike Gibbons leading 3 months out, with only leading by 2 in the latest poll, I think leans in the direction that he might have peaked too early. He has 3 months to be attacked, and it's not like he's running in a field with no clear opposition. He's not running in a field of 20 candidates where they're all taking 2%. He's got Josh Mandel, who likes to tweet a lot, right on his tail. There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, Jane Timken is still there. Although those are probably the main 3. Bernie Moreno is out at this point, of course.
And
Matt
JD
Dolan
Vance
is still there.
And JD Vance is out. He just hasn't realized it yet.
Yeah, and Matt Dolan, of course, is still in there, who is being endorsed by a lot of the establishment Republican base. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Matt Dolan were to drop out, if he would support Gibbons. That would not surprise me at all. Even Vance, the polls of Vance have shown his base are bizarrely enough people who are least likely to moderate to liberal Republicans who don't like Trump. I'm not sure if it's because of all the ads. I'm not sure if it's because of all the ads that were pointing out that JD Vance really did not like Donald Trump.
I'm sorry. I love that more than you could possibly know.
Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting point here, right? JD Vance got a lot of attention early in the race. He declared he got support from Josh Hawley. He got support from Jim Banks, who's the head of the Republican Study Committee. Has a lot of money behind him. Literally an endless font of money. In Peter Thiel, and on top of that, he has his own money because he's independently wealthy and positive press stuff from his book. The problem is that being a nationally best-selling author in the New York Times is not necessarily the most compelling profile in the Republican Party. Whereas Matt Dolan, is he's not only is he not running a left-wing economic campaign, he's also he fits a lot of the same boxes as JD Vance and is a more compelling profile, at least maybe a better public speaker than Vance for sure. We're seeing a similar thing in Arizona where, the Mark Brnovich seems to tentatively have the lead for now. Blake Masters isn't really a big deal. It seems like the top 2 there are Brnovich, Lamont.
To be fair to Blake Masters, and I do not want to be fair to Blake Masters, the new poll out from Coefficient,
Coefficient. Yeah, the same one.
Has Blake Masters in 3rd at 12%, only 5% behind Mark Brnovich. He's not out of the race, much to my disappointment.
Yeah, although again, a lot of Arizona depends on the entry of a new candidate in Doug Ducey, who's actually not only seen his gubernatorial approvals creep back up to positive, but also seems to be presumptively leading most polls, where he is being presented as a hypothetical nominee.
I don't think he's as strong in a general election as he was once.
But unlike in Arizona, Ohio's field is pretty much set at this point. There's not really anyone who could run for Senate who's not running. Everyone announced pretty early. They've had their time to set up their messages. So
Yeah.
really, I mean, you're pointing out that he could have peaked too early. I could say peaking right now could really get the attention, get people like Matt Dolan to drop out, get people like James Timken to drop out if her polling continues to decline. Those would be credible sources of support in the Republican primary. There's a lot of Republican voters around Cincinnati in particular that would vote for an establishment-backed candidate.
Yeah, see, I could see Matt Dolan dropping out. Timken has the hope of a Trump endorsement, so I don't think she's going anywhere. Maybe Mike Gibbons gets a Trump endorsement. I don't necessarily see that. I think if it doesn't go to Timken, it's going to go to Mandel or nobody. But peaking 3 months out isn't necessarily a bad thing, but Vance nor Mandel have shown any hesitation to attack credible opponents. So I think he would have been better served to kind of remain under the radar a little bit longer.
Yeah, and that's entirely fair. I think one thing that's been interesting about this cycle is the number of competitive party primaries, specifically on the Republican side. There's not nearly as much fun on the Democratic side. It seems like once the DSCC settles on a candidate, that's pretty much it. Everyone else kind of drops out fairly quickly. On the Republican side, it's much more likely to see a fight.
Unless your name is John Fetterman.
Yeah, unless your name is John Fetterman, in which case, who knows what's going on. I mean, for example, in Alabama, we still have a competitive three-way race in Alabama between Katie Britt, Mo Brooks, the Trump-endorsed candidate, as he mentions on his Twitter profile, and in every single public statement he could possibly indicate.
Mo Brooks is endorsed by Trump?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
I had no idea.
Search his Twitter handle. His Twitter name is his Mo Brooks endorsed by President Trump.
Is it really?
Yes.
Wow.
And then Mike Durant has been coming up in the background. That's another race where we're seeing did Katie Boyd Britt peak too early? She was leading in quite a number of the polls, at least being in the top two. Now it's it looks like a three-way race. Mike Durant has kind of come out of nowhere in recent months, despite some personal controversies on his part. Not that it would matter in Alabama at this point.
I was about to say, unless your name is Roy Moore, personal controversy doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we're gonna keep track of all these. I assume Joe is gonna write that article because he usually says he will. But we'll keep an eye out for this coverage because we will be covering these races closely. We're getting into election season. Our name is Elections Daily. We're keeping track of this stuff for you. But yeah, we're really, really interested to see how some of these go. The Republican side of these is really consistently fascinating in a lot of these states, even safe states. You always have this, the climbing the ladder, trying to be the first person to get to the top. Used to be you get the Trump endorsement and that's it. Now the Trump endorsement is not the be all end all. And we're seeing some really interesting stuff going on. So we'll keep you covered throughout the cycle as this progresses.
In Mo Brooks's case, it also doesn't help that he's running an abysmal campaign. I mean,
yeah,
the Trump endorsement will help a lot, but if that's your only campaign message, you need something.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also on his part. I've mentioned this before. He is from a geographically terrible area to run a primary from, which is Huntsville. In Alabama, you want to run from Birmingham or from Montgomery. Running from Mobile or from Huntsville is pretty terrible because actually relatively few people live there. And it's pretty separated from the rest of the state. Birmingham in particular, big Republican suburbs. People talk about the city. The suburbs around it are not only Republican, they are beyond Republican. They're like a separate level of Republican from the rest of the country. Some of these precincts, you really want to be running well there more so than in Mobile, which it's a big city, relatively big by Alabama standards, or by deep South standards, but it's not where you want to run from. Same with Huntsville, and a lot of those voters there don't vote in Republican primaries or are Democrats. It's a more competitive city, but regardless, that's an interesting state. This is all interesting. We will be here next week as well as usual covering this in our next episode, but I think we're going to wrap it up today for this episode. Really good discussion here. Hope you guys appreciated it despite the wait. We'll try to be on time next week as per usual, our usual time of Thursdays at 5:15 Eastern. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate your support. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on a podcast platform, you can like and subscribe to our show. That really helps us grow. Share with your friends. People really seem to like what we're doing. So if you like what we're doing, feel free to spread the love around. You can find me on Twitter at DE Cunningham 2, and Elections Daily at elections_daily on Twitter, and elections-daily.com. We've got some cool stuff coming from you. We got some projects we're still working on behind the scenes. We want to reveal these to you, but we've got to get the details worked out and get them up first. But we are really excited for some of the projects that are in the works, so be sure to stay tuned to that. Where can we find you guys on Twitter for those of us who are listening on podcast, Joe and Dylan?
You can find me at Joseph Szymanski. That is JOSEPH SZYMANSKI. Just all one letter, and that's where you can find me on Twitter. And before Dylan goes, I also want to say, folks, and I'm going to put for our viewers in the chat here, Elections Daily is starting to look for freelance writers again. We put out a tweet about that today. Specifically, we're looking for folks from the Midwest and the South. I'm putting that link to the thing in the chat. If you're at all interested, we would love to have you guys, some of our viewers, potentially take a shot, especially if you're from those areas, to take a look at giving us some articles as we start to really ramp up production here going into the 2022 election cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
And you can find me at Dylan B. Wade 1, DYLAN, the only correct spelling of Dylan. DWADE1. Thanks for listening.
Yep. Thank you guys. And yeah, like just said, if you're interested in contributing, we do pay for our content now. So if you're, we do provide that for our contributors. If you have knowledge in an area, if you're interested in contributing or covering a state, covering an election, we'd love to see your work. So be sure to do that. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate your support. We'll see you next week, Thursday, as usual, for Elections Weekly. See you next time.